guys, I have promised a couple videos on my grow tents, and I have been so sick lately that I have just not been able to get it done, and I absolutely had to get out today and check these guys and see if they need water and see how the light and temperature, etc. is doing. And so I thought, you know what? I'll just check with you guys. So I'm guessing these guys are going to be pretty thirsty. This is my little, just really flimsy little cheap grow tent that lives in the garage, where it doesn't ever freeze, but it will get down to, 40 if we have a lot of winds and don't start a fire in here. It'll even drop colder potentially, but it hasn't yet this year. And so the little bit of a grow tent gives me a frame to hang the lights off of, and also I have a little heater down in the bottom just in case, because these mess seams are just too precious for me to risk it, even though they would probably be all right. Now, a couple things that I want to mention here is that when I transfer my plants from just wherever they were, either outside or in, southern facing windows, etc., to a grow tent, I am a little bit cautious. And like right now, I'm just going to tip this up here. I have the one grow light here, whereas usually I would put two all the way across. The same for down here. There's just one so far. And on this last shelf, there's one. Whereas typically I would have two, which I will be putting these up shortly. But I didn't want to sunburn any of these, and we had about a month of extremely cloudy weather. And so when transferring these guys into here, I just didn't want to take a risk and burn them. So I wanted to give them a little bit of time to adjust and make sure they're happy. So I will be adding some more lights to these shortly, as it looks like they're doing pretty great. I'm going to see if I can flip this. Yeah, that way we can see a little bit of more of a true color. The white grow lights are really the nicest for looking at your plants and videoing, etc. But especially if you're wanting to get any flowers, you need some of the red and blue, spectrums to get that. Alrighty, I'll just point out, as you can, I'm sure, see the shriveling on these guys here. They're just needing a drink. Same with these guys. These are pretty good, but most of these could use a little drink. This guy had, oh, he's all nice and thin now. He had some rot. He was a new cutting. You can see this one here isn't going to survive, but the rest of them look like they're ready for a drink and going to survive. These guys are thirsty also. When I switch them from wherever I've had them for a while to their winter location, another thing that I'm very cautious on is watering. Even though the conophytum are waking up and blooming and this is their active growth period, the difference between being out in the shop and in here right now, as you can see in their little grow tent at 66, the difference in being, in the 50s and 60s versus being in the house where it's 75 about to 70 is huge as far as the evaporation and their water needs. And so I tend to let them go a bit dry at the first, just so that I have a really good idea that they're thirsty. And as you can see, I have a guy here that was a cutting. Well, you can see it's not really a cutting, but it had some rot on one of these stems, and I just laid it out to let it dry and make sure this guy is happy, and he looks great. I'm gonna trim the roots and plant him up. But anyways, when you're going from fall to winter or spring to summer, be really, really cautious about your watering, and be sure that you pay attention to actually what your plants are wanting, not just keeping your normal cycle. Because like for me, a lot of my pots, even indoors, if they're not being moved to a cooler environment, a lot of my pots that typically I would water every week will go for sometimes 2 or 3 weeks, and the soil will still be, have a little bit of moisture in it. And so it's just way better to check and just don't get into some happy little routine, and just keep going. Check and make sure your plants are actually showing signs of either needing water when you're going into the winter, or make sure that your plants are not drying out too much when you're headed into the summer. All right, another exception that I have, which is why I generally don't talk a lot of rules when I make these videos, but another thing that I kind of change up a bit when the seasons are changing is how I water. And I only do this for the first few times typically, but sometimes I continue with ones that I'm just a little bit concerned about. And that is when plants are in the summer and outdoors, I soak them a lot more and rarely use a squirt bottle. But in these conditions, when they're in a much cooler environment and their conditions have just changed, I tend to use a squirt bottle because I am not comfortable yet seeing how long this takes to dry out in this particular environment, because one of the things about grow tents that I really dislike with succulents in general is just that they restrict the airflow so much, and that's hugely important with most succulents. And so because of the restricted airflow, obviously the humidity levels come up, which the heater helps some and could potentially help a lot, but I'm wanting this to be in a cooler environment. I'm not wanting to have the heater cranked up. If for whatever reason some of these guys got too much of a drink and I was concerned, I would absolutely crank the heater up. Another thing that I usually have is a little miniature fan that I just have to help circulate the air. It really helps prevent some bug infestations and just different things. But these guys have only been in here for the last 2 weeks, and so they haven't, I haven't got the fan set up in here. But it really makes a big difference, for me anyways, having a fan just circulating the air. So, I'm gonna get my squirt bottle going here, just a second. Trying to do this one-handed, sorry you guys. All right, so what I do is just get a stream on these guys and give them some good drinks gently so that I'm not disturbing a lot of the soil. Some of these larger clusters, I would be totally fine, like with this one here, to soak it, because this one is planted in pure pumice and is a quite established plant, and I'm a lot more familiar with its water requirements. But some of the others that have started from cuttings or are more recent, etc., I am a lot more cautious with and give them small drinks. I would rather give them smaller drinks at more regular intervals until I get really comfortable with how they're going to respond in this particular environment, how fast they're going to soak up water, and how quick they're going to respond, and how long they're going to stay wet. This is where having a water meter, I've heard, you know, multiple people recommending having a water meter for these guys. I haven't found them super helpful. I do use a water meter for some things occasionally, but I've found for small pots they don't work super well, and for the type of soil mixtures that I use on these guys, like mostly pumice, some are all pumice, and really loose gritty mixes, the water meter just doesn't have enough soil come in contact with the probe to really give an accurate reading. And so it'll say, oh, it's bone dry, when it's not really. There's still enough moisture for the plant to be pulling out of it if it needed it. So yeah, whatever you find works for you. If you have larger pots and deeper pots, it can be helpful, but for a lot of them I haven't found it super helpful. All right, as you've probably seen, I am skipping the lithops very purposefully. Echinophytum are just waking up as it's getting to be winter, and as you can see, they've finished blooming. And the lithops have finished blooming also, but they bloom at the end of their growth cycle. I'm going to see if any of these guys are kind of starting to have babies or new leaves show through. Sorry, not babies. I get excited and call them babies, but that's very interesting. I'm really not sure what's happening with this one right here. It looks like a new leaf set. It's just a little hard to tell yet. As you can see, this guy, this lovely guy, is blooming. And these ones here, I'm going to switch these out. Underneath the blooms, you can see here that there's new leaves right down there that are going to start popping out. So these outer leaves are going to be shriveling and feeding the new leaves, and we really don't want to water right now, especially because they're in this grow tent with other things that I'm watering, which is going to raise the humidity level and give them a little bit of a drink. So even the ones that are slightly more shriveled that I would usually give a drink, I'm not going to give those a drink. These guys are some newer ones. Well, newer as in, 6 months or so. And usually are a bit more on the thirsty side. But I'm not going to give them a drink right now. I'm going to see if the humidity levels will plump them up a bit. And on this level, these guys, oh dear. Yeah, like I said, I've been really sick, and this is bone dry, which these guys need to go upstairs in my grow tent because they need a lot more water than this one. But I was so sick and they needed sun, so I poked them in here real quick. These are Chinese dunce caps, if anyone's wondering, and you can see the outside is dying back. These guys need a little bit of a cooler period, which is why I wanted them out in the garage. But then they needed more light, and I didn't have a light set up for them. So they will be moving just because the amount of water that they take in causes just too much humidity in this tent for me right now. So I will be moving them for a permanent location. Alrighty, we're going to give these guys just a quick little soak right next to their roots here. And then I will be, this cluster obviously needs to be planted deeper and needs a good drink. A couple of these, I believe, yeah, it's this one here I planted in a new mix. And so I'm going to be keeping a real close eye on them and seeing how they like that as compared to the others. This guy here definitely needs a drink. Don't know if you can see on these little baby toes here. Yeah, that's just a little bit of mist on them, but they're a little bit shriveled. You can just use just a little drink here. I've had a few people comment on my watering habits, and I can't stress enough that how much you water, how often you water, etc. is so dependent on your environment, your potting medium, your temperatures, your humidity levels, where at in the world you are, as far as what growth phase your plants are going to be in, etc. So please don't watch what I do and just assume that no matter where you are, that's going to be helpful for your plants, because that is definitely not the case. But usually I find that showing what I'm doing and why. Sorry, I'm getting a little out of breath here. I haven't been able to be out of bed much, and I've stood up for a bit and I'm finding myself out of breath. But I usually find that showing what I'm doing and why can be really helpful, even if people aren't in the same situation, just in case you find your plant's in a very similar situation at one point. And discussing why I'm doing what I'm doing helps, because you can know if it's likely to be applicable to you or not. Alrighty, this lovely little Denteranthus has just been hanging on ever since I got him, just by a thread. And that looks like a mealybug. Yep. So I'm actually not going to give him a drink. He was cooked in the mail a bit and is just not really recovered, but I'm hoping, which I've had him for at least 8 months or so. So he's had quite a while to recover, but this lower leaf seems to be very happy, and I think these are just gonna, we shall see. He's been a little bit of a more finicky, a more finicky one for me. And this guy came with some split older leaves, and then a mouse decided to just make lunch out of this guy and a couple others and just take bites out, as you can see here. I was so cranky. There's another one that's much more clearly nibbled, and it's kind of humorous, except for, yeah, that it's my babies. But as you can see down there, we got a little cluster coming out, which is super exciting. Got a little tiger's jaw here that got very stressed and shriveled and too much light, and so I set him off to the side again. That's why I just had one light on one side, so that I could kind of have some of the ones that were a bit too stressed on the one side and the ones that needed more light on the other, and let them recover. But as you can see, the little centers are getting light here, which means he's ready for more light and definitely wants some more light. So I'm going to go ahead and put the secondary lights up in here, because nobody is showing any signs of too much sun. In fact, they look to me like they could be quite happy with a bit more. You can see the lighter growth down here. I noticed some up here also. There were some other ones that I was looking at up here and noticing on the conophytum that they were showing some signs of even, you know, needing more light. This guy got a little bit stressed, and I set him to the side also, and you can see he's lighter. Definitely not stressed, definitely not too dark or sunburned, so he's going to go back under, directly under, I should say, the grow light, and should perk right up. Alrighty, I don't have my tiny little fan sitting right here to show you. That'll have to be in another video. But having a thermometer with a humidity gauge on it has been hugely helpful for me, just to have an idea of what's going on, especially with me being very neglectful lately, and not checking on them or caring for them nearly as often as I should the last few weeks. So I can have my husband just peek in, and he'll be like, oh, this is the temperature and this is the humidity. And I can rest a little bit easier than I might otherwise. One thing I always do here too, I'll just mention, is I take the very bottom, if I'm having a heater or a fan in a grow tent like this, I tie up, I take the little ties that usually would just be down here to keep it down, and I actually purposefully tie them up on both sides, which makes it not be able to zip all the way down, which allows for better airflow. And I need to keep it zipped up because I have animals and stuff in here, and the cats decide that they love to play in pots randomly or just get curious or whatever, and so I need it kind of closed, and I usually stick something kind of in front of it to block, but it allows airflow in. The grow tent that I have upstairs is a much nicer one, and it has lots of vents that you can open and close, but really, unless you're going to be, you know, professionally growing something or really needing a certain environment, these little cheap tents can really be great if you just need to keep your plants a little bit warmer, or just have a platform to hang off the grow lights, because they're a little awkward to have strewn around your house, so to speak. yeah, if there's any other questions you have that I have just spaced on answering, let me know. I will do a video on my grow tent upstairs at some point, and also on the grow lights. I have not forgotten about the requests of making videos on the grow lights, etc. I just haven't been able to get to it, but I promise I have a list of the requests, and we'll get to those as soon as I can. Alrighty, you guys, I hope that was helpful for you in some way, and I wish you all a fantastic December, and happy growing!